Multi-club ownership. Just the mention of this concept leads to blood boiling. UEFA's latest benchmarking report in early 2023 went into a lot of detail on this topic and how it's shaping the landscape of global and European football. And after reading that full report, I came to one conclusion. This is a trend that is undeniably here to stay. More than 180 clubs around the world were part of a multi-club investment structure at the end of 2022, a 450% increase from the 40 registered in 2012. But even that is likely far from reality in 2024. Sports Business, in collaboration with CIES Sports Intelligence, claimed that at the end of 2023, over 301 clubs had been identified as being part of a multi-club ownership group. We're going to be continuously adding resources. We've talked about having a multi-club model. I would love to continue to build out that footprint. Todd Boehly, owner of Chelsea Football Club, said this all the way back in 2022. Red Bull, the City Football Group, they're just the tip of the iceberg. They may represent a rather large tip, but their existence is an indicator of a lot of things. The appetite to tap into a sport that has billions of built-in fans, revenue streams, and commercial sponsorships is huge. That's the most obvious one. However, the integrity of the game at hand is becoming more and more questionable as conflicts of interests, accusations of market manipulation, and much more are bound to arise. Those are the most threatening ones. A threat led by America. Kidding. But that brings us to the question of the day. What's the deal with multi-club ownership? Yo, what's going on, guys? Hope we're all doing well. I'm Tinashe, welcome back to the channel. MCO groups are the talk of the town lately. For good reason too, but before going into some real-world examples, I think it's best to get some definitions out the way first. So, what is multi-club ownership? I guess there are probably a lot of ways to define this, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to go ahead and stick to UEFA's definition. Multi-club ownership is a situation where a party exerts control and/or a decisive influence over more than one club. Now, this is not to be confused with multi-club investment, a situation where a party has investment interests in more than one club without exerting control or influence, which is similar, but it's not really the same thing and definitely comes into play when we're going into things like conflicts of interests, which we'll go into a bit more. The hub of MCO groups lie in Europe, to the surprise of absolutely nobody. However, while the vast majority of teams and MCOs originate from Europe, several of these organizations hold investments in clubs outside of Europe. A team in Brazil, a team in Austria, a team in New York, a team in Germany, and this is nowhere near the most diverse. I feel I should probably say that things like MCOs and MCIs are absolutely nothing new in the world of football. ENIC Group, yes, the same organization that owns Tottenham Hotspur, held large ownership of several clubs all the way back in the late 90s. This portfolio included 6 separate clubs in 2002: Tottenham Hotspur, Rangers, AEK Athens, and FC Basel, amongst many more. But the landscape has certainly changed since then. So why? Why the sudden boom in wanting to own several football clubs? Why do so many large organizations so badly want to enter every single market they possibly can? Well, there are a couple reasons for this. The most obvious being networking. By participating in this sort of model, what you get is a network of organizations that can all tap into each other's resources, insights, and much more, and all become stronger. The first division top dog is able to assist the smaller league side with business intelligence, strategy, and systems. The smaller team in a national third division might have ties to hidden gems that would never fall under the radar of a Champions League regular. Players themselves now have access to a global network, meaning that they have a more defined pathway and goal to work towards. Your club plays in Ghana but is part of an MCO that has a team in Italy. A tangible pipeline now exists. The networking and idea generation is especially the case when it comes to foreign, non-European investors. In 2022, out of all of UEFA's MCO groups, a third of them had roots stemming from North America, 27 out of 82. Americans have been in the European footballing scene for decades, but things have gone into overdrive lately. Many believe that this uptick is in large part thanks to the cease in sponsorship from China. Chinese investors poured billions into European football over the last decade or so, but were forced to stop thanks to government mandates in China restricting several investment categories to within Chinese borders. This left a gap in the market, and that's where America stepped in. Now, American sports get a lot of flack from non-Americans who do not understand the culture. It's too loud, it's too boisterous and in your face. Why is everyone yelling? Why is it called football when they are not only using their hands, but also holding an egg? However, for all the flack that American sports gets, those in charge of organizing everything over there are definitely doing something right. And a lot of the people investing in European football now have long been successful in the American sporting scene. Which brings us to the next point, rather inevitably, and that's the price to enter the European footballing scene. It's not a hell of a lot. By comparison, at least. Fenway Sports Group technically isn't a multi-club organization group when it comes to football, as they only have one football club under their umbrella, but they are a multi-sports team organization. Liverpool, the Boston Red Sox, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and several other subsidiaries in sports and entertainment. Back in 2010, they bought Liverpool for roughly $349 million. Now, that's a huge sum, but it's almost half of the $660 million that they paid for the Boston Red Sox in 2002, almost a decade before that. And look at what FSG has done with Liverpool. Now, it's widely documented that Liverpool have adopted a Moneyball approach to their scouting and recruitment. Numbers and advanced analytics simply do not lie. Now, the Boston Red Sox have won 4 World Series titles using this approach, and Liverpool themselves haven't been too shabby over the past 10 years either. The Reds were only able to latch on to this philosophy through the resources that were gained from their owners' other businesses. Even further to that, Redbird Capital Partners bought a $750 million stake in FSG back in 2021. Redbird own AC Milan and Toulouse FC, partially Liverpool now too. Seattle Sounders are another example of a team that has benefited greatly from being part of an ownership structure that spans several sports teams. Minority ownership to this club comes in the form of the Paul Allen Trust. Founded in 2007, the Sounders enjoyed a meteoric rise to the very top of the MLS, becoming MLS champions in 2016. They were helped along the way by the estate of Paul Allen, minority owners of the Seattle Sounders, but full owners of the Seattle Seahawks. Being able to lean on the marketing, sales, and customer service knowledge of an NFL powerhouse probably helped quite a bit. Arsenal and Manchester United are further examples of football clubs that are in an MCO group and whose owners drive decisions for several sporting organizations. Even Sir Jim Ratcliffe's Ineos, who own 25% of Manchester United now, also own Nice. Now, all of these models may not mirror those of an FSG when it comes to sharing of resources and ideologies across sporting spheres, but this is just to say that at the highest level, there are more connections between the biggest teams in every sporting landscape than you may think. Plus, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Newcastle's ownership have all indicated that the multi-football club model is what they're aiming for. So, as we can see, MCOs exclusive to football may be new to some, but they've been around for a while. They might be getting more and more popular as each day goes, but the philosophies, the infrastructure, the ideas behind it, it's nothing new. It was estimated at the end of 2023 that there were 124 MCO groups in global football, which means it's impossible to look into all of them and how they're performing in just one video. So I thought a better idea would be to take a look at 4 real-world examples. And why not start with the organization that I'm pretty sure a lot of you clicked on this video for, the City Football Group. The City Football Group was founded back in 2013, following on from when the Abu Dhabi United Group purchased Manchester City in 2008. It started with just one, and after 16 years, there are now 13 football clubs in the City Football Group network. They span over 5 continents and 13 different countries, and have thrown their eggs into multiple baskets within multiple varying environments. The crown jewel of the group and the main indicator of the system's success in a lot of people's eyes is none other than the best football team on the planet, Manchester City. Manchester City are absolute titans at this point. There is no indicator that they're going to slow down or that they haven't made adequate arrangements to make sure they're successful long into the future. In 2008, Manchester City lost 8-1 to Middlesbrough, finishing 9th with 55 points. This was the most amount of points that they'd ever earned in a Premier League season since the inception of the Premier League. They had been relegated twice, promoted twice, relegated again, and promoted again between 1996 and 2002. Yet, fast forward to 2023, and they were the second most successful team in the history of English football and only the second English team to win a European treble. They've gone from an overall revenue of 85 million euros per year in the 2007-08 season to a record-breaking 826 million euros in the 2022-23 season. And when I say record-breaking, I mean in Premier League history. The numbers are honestly unreal, and all of that, absolutely every detail, is thanks to the City Football Group.
I know you're not following what I'm saying anyway, right? That's okay, that doesn't matter. The real question is this: was all this legal? Absolutely fucking not.
Of course, there are 115 reasons that allegedly suggest that something nefarious has been going on, but I'd like to remind everyone that for the moment, all of those reasons are exactly how I just described them. Alleged. Otherwise, CFG have gone about building up the rest of their portfolio in ways that have never been seen before, and have already seen success outside of their crown jewel. At this current moment in time, their most successful non-Manchester City team is Girona. This is the best team that Catalonia has to offer in 2024, and they're keeping up with Real Madrid at the very top of the table. Bear in mind that this team was in the third tier in 2008 and the Segunda division as recently as 2022. Last year, they achieved their highest ever finish in La Liga with a 10th place finish and 49 points. They've already outdone that campaign, and it's still February. How did they do this? Well, they have access to the greatest footballing network of all time. That's how. City have been loaning them players for almost a decade now. They've been training at the Etihad during off seasons. This is what happens when you give a lower league team the resources and infrastructure that Manchester City has. Plus, Pep Guardiola's brother is running the whole operation. Knowing all of that makes all of this make sense. I made a detailed breakdown of Girona's rise here if you want to check that out. We can all wholeheartedly agree that CFG is a massive success, but it's probably worth pointing out that despite all of their successes, as a whole, the group has never made a profit. Massive shout out to the Swiss Ramble, who makes some of the best reports on football finance on the internet, easily digestible with a sense of humor. He went through all of CFG's finances over the past few years, so I didn't have to, and found out that while Manchester City might be flourishing, recording incredible profits, the group as a whole still has a way to go. Nonetheless, you'd have to imagine that this will change if this keeps up. Red Bull is the other MCO that is quickly recognized as frontrunners in the realm. Their model is slightly different to CFG's, as can be seen by the fact that all of their teams are very clearly branded. RB Leipzig, Red Bull Salzburg, Red Bull Bragantino, Red Bull New York. There's a trend here. I can't seem to fathom what though. Red Bull weren't allowed to put a corporate entity in the name of their German team thanks to strict DFB regulations. Rasenballsport Leipzig, or Lawnball Sports Leipzig, has finished outside of the top 4 in the Bundesliga only once in the past 7 years. Not bad for a team that was founded only in 2009. However, the case of Red Bull is much more complicated than that of CFG or the others. Football forms a very small portion of their overall sporting portfolio. Formula 1, surfing, ice hockey, esports, and extreme sports such as wingsuit racing, rallycross racing, and MotoGP form just the tip of the iceberg for them. They've invested in over 15 sports teams across 11 sports and always seem to be expanding. And to differentiate themselves even more from their MCO contemporaries, it looks like growth on a sporting front is pretty much secondary to them. What really matters is marketing. How many people can they show their brand to, and how many audiences can they reach? I'm drinking Red Bull right now. It's well documented that the equivalent cost that Red Bull would have had to pay to gain the marketing exposure that they've been able to generate themselves is obscene. Who would have thought that buying a bunch of sports teams would be cheaper than just paying other people to market for you? Think Verstappen, think cool, think speed, think Red Bull. They really need to hire me for their next marketing campaign or something. I'll work for free. Just give me more Red Bull. However, it's not just that. It's also well known that Red Bull are really good at nurturing talent within their portfolio clubs, as well as the entire global footballing landscape too. Dayo Upamecano, Dominic Szoboszlai, Naby Keita, Amadou Haidara, Konrad Laimer, Sadio Mane, and more have all thrived thanks to RB Salzburg's infrastructure. All of them, bar Mane, went straight to Leipzig too. At the same time, Red Bull is not very well liked by most German football goers because why would they be? German football is all about bringing the fans as close to the game as possible. 50+1 is a regulation in German football that requires members of the club, i.e. fans, to hold 50% plus one more vote of voting rights. This ensures that private investors can't take over the club and make changes that go against the interest of the fans. RB Leipzig is technically a 50+1 club, however their membership structure limits the amount of voting members and the membership fees are huge, meaning that they can basically bypass 50+1's rulings and gain structural and financial advantages. So it's a mixed bag, really. There have been several new MCOs that have emerged over the past few years. One of the largest growing newcomers is Eagle Football, a group headed up by American John Textor. The group has major stakes in Botafogo, Olympique Lyonnais, and RDW Molenbeek in Belgium, and a large portion of Crystal Palace. Textor's been very open about his intentions with this MCO, sharing of resources, players, all the regular stuff. And because this development is quite new, all these acquisitions have been fairly recent, it might be fair to say that we can't really pass judgment yet. However, there have been varied results across the board. Ever since their investment into Crystal Palace, there has been a disdain that the fans have had for their ownership, and Textor in particular, publicly falling out with chairman Steve Parish, continued employment of Roy Hodgson, and a general feeling that he doesn't have the best intentions for Palace are quite strong. When it comes to Lyon, the situation is far worse. They've spent the majority of the current season in the relegation zone and are only 4 points off dead last at the time of recording this. It's honestly a very crazy story that's been going on, and the question is, what's been going wrong? Well, too much to include in one video, of course, but to summarize a large portion of the fan base: ownership. In the 2023-24 season alone, Lyon have had 3 different managers. They are over $400 million in debt, and the former owner and current owner have been in a feud seemingly since the takeover back in 2022. Jean-Michel Aulas was the owner of the club between 1987 and 2022, so you can only imagine that there was a lot of familiarity, heritage, and probably a lot of processes that were locked and maybe unchanged throughout the 35 years. The conflict seems to have stemmed from strategic differences between Aulas and Textor. Now, Aulas was asked to stay on as club president to prevent brain drain and smooth the transition over one owner to another. He was asked to stay on for 3 more years. The sale was finalized in December 2022, yet only 5 months later, Aulas had stepped down amidst an apparent feud with the new leadership. Textor and his crew believed that many of the club's processes were outdated and obsolete in the current football climate. Their intentions were to modernize and restructure. In 35 years, Aulas took the men's team from a second division side to a European powerhouse. 7 straight titles in a row pre-oil money is crazy. The women's side won the domestic league 14 times in a row between 2006 and 2020, and the Champions League 5 times in a row between 2016 and 2020, with not 1, not 2, not 3, not even 4, but 5 trebles, the best women's football club in existence. All of this happened under Aulas. Now, the fans have disagreed with him over the past few decades when it comes to certain decisions, but when it comes to the new ownership and the old ownership, I'm gonna let you guys be the judge of who the fans probably sided with. Outside of that, Botafogo haven't really experienced nearly as many extremes. They even led the Campeonato Brasileiro for most of 2023. On a more questionable note, Crystal Palace is owned in part by John Textor and another American investor, David Blitzer, both of whom have ownership stakes in opposing teams in the Belgian football pyramid: RWD Molenbeek for Textor, SK Beveren for Blitzer. Teams that finished 1 place apart in both the 2021-22 and 2022-23 Belgian second division seasons. Can anybody spell conflict of interest? For legal reasons, this is purely an observation and nothing more. 777 Partners, or 777 is what I'm going to call them, are another MCO that have made a big splash. Their portfolio includes 7 separate clubs, with 1 more club still pending at the time of recording. That one still pending is Everton. Although by the looks of things, it looks like if any deal is going to go through here, 777 will probably be acquiring a championship squad from Farhad Moshiri. Otherwise, they are the full controllers of the oldest club in Italy, Genoa, and a minority controller of the Europa League final boss, Sevilla. According to them, they've taken a slightly different approach to the usual MCO model we've seen thus far. For all of the examples that I've mentioned thus far, there exists a flagship club as well as a bunch of others. And when it comes to all the others, they kind of exist and are designed to feed their best talents to the flagship club. We don't have a hierarchy of clubs. This is not a pyramid type model. This is really about preserving the independence and the deep and rich histories of the individual clubs. Joshua Wonder, managing partner of the Miami-based group, had this to say after the majority 64.7% stake in Hertha Berlin was acquired. Fair enough. Wonder himself has been catching a lot of flack throughout this whole process. In 2022, after the majority stake in Vasco da Gama was purchased, it came out that he had been arrested after ordering 31 grams of baking powder to his house in 2003, the kind of baking powder that Quincy Promise handles. He was also once sued by the Bellagio Casino for failing to pay back over $54,000 in cash advances. Let's be real for a second and acknowledge that all of this happened decades ago and clearly hasn't affected his ability to grow all these businesses and become a high-standing member in that space. But at the same time, it's the sort of publicity that you don't really want, especially when you're in a business when the entire world criticizes your character. What's worse is that since all of these clubs were acquired, results have also varied. Hertha were relegated last season, Genoa were relegated, then climbed back up, Sevilla have been struggling all year, but they did win the Europa League last season, so there is that. It's another mixed bag. Several more organizations are following suit with this business model. I mentioned Todd Bowley at the start of the video. Blue Co Consortium, of which he is a founder, own 100% of both Chelsea and RC Strasbourg. And if we're all being honest, this makes a lot of sense coming from Chelsea. Their infamous loan army has been a great driver of revenue over the years, but they kind of relinquish control over a player's development when they send them to a whole other organization. By being part of a large network of organizations, they can avoid doing so. David Blitzer's Global Football Holdings, who, as I mentioned, is part owner of Palace, has several other clubs under his ownership: FC Augsburg, Brøndby, ADO Den Haag, SK Beveren, and many more. The Saudi Arabian PIF controls the biggest clubs in the Pro League as well as Newcastle, and are undoubtedly going to add to that. Gianpaolo Pozzo has owned Udinese Calcio since 1986, and at one point he owned all of Udinese, Granada in Spain, and Watford in England. He would send players back and forth between the clubs, much like all the other MCOs we've talked about. As of 2024, the Pozzo family only controls Udinese and Watford. MCOs are here to stay. Within the next 5 to 10 years, your favorite club will be part of an MCO, if it isn't already in one. It seems like the next evolution when it comes to talent acquisition and strategic building, I guess. So why the hate? From an overall perspective, what are the major problems with MCOs? The problems include, but definitely are not limited to, the following. 1. Transfer market manipulation. Multi-club groups use their networks to shift players around from club to club on loan or through free transfers, so no fees are paid, or virtually no fees are paid. A situation where a multi-billion-pound club buys a player that its less cash-flush network team can't afford, specifically for its less cash-flush network team, feels kinda odd, right? I'm not the person to consult about the legalities of it all. Of course, all of my videos are satire, but it seems like all of this could potentially open the door to clever and efficient circumvention of FFP, among other things. UEFA said that more than 6,500 players exist within a multi-club group structure in their 2022 benchmarking report. The number of clubs confirmed in multi-club networks since this report has almost doubled. That's a lot of swapping around. 2. Conflicts of interest. Many leagues have strict regulations against multi-club groups within the same nation. However, this doesn't completely close the door to clever loopholes. I mentioned John Textor and David Blitzer earlier on. Two men that jointly own one team within one league and also separately own two other competing teams in another division. This situation seems like it could be problematic if bad actors are involved. It's very complicated to argue the ethics here. But then again, in that example, we're talking about two teams in the Belgian second division, relatively not the top level. But what about teams in, let's say, the Champions League? Manchester City and Girona will likely both be in the UCL next season. What happens then? Well, we all know what will happen because we've seen this situation play out before. RB Leipzig and RB Salzburg have both been in European competitions for years now. They've even played one another before, twice. This was in the group stages of the 18-19 Europa League. Salzburg won both times. The reason this was allowed to happen is as follows. No individual or legal entity may have control or influence over more than one club participating in a UEFA club competition. UEFA decided that no individual or legal entity had decisive control or influence over more than one of the clubs involved here. Now, Red Bull's lawyers did a really good job of making sure that was the case, and believe you me, Manchester City's lawyers will do an even better job. Number 3. Trust issues. It's really hard to ascertain the intentions of some of these owners, especially when they're buying up every single club under the sun. How sure are you that they're not going to just take your team and use it as a farm for another team? How sure are you that they really have the best interests of your club at heart? Now, I'm talking here from the perspective of a fan. If you're not a flagship team, what are your future prospects? Crystal Palace fans have held this line of thought ever since the Eagle football takeover. Who is the flagship? Lyon or us? Lyon fans feel the exact same way. If both sets of fans feel this way, something might be wrong. CFG was built for Manchester City, so there really isn't any fear for them. But what about their other success story, Girona? Their star boy, Savinho, made it clear that Man City is his goal all the way back when he signed for Troyes. Recent reports show that he'll achieve this goal come next season. But even this deal has been scrutinized for potential manipulation of the transfer market. Where will this leave Girona in the future? Now, smaller teams have always struggled to keep their best talents, there's no surprise here, but the inevitability of this sort of pipeline is kind of disheartening, I think. And finally, the last reason for why MCOs are so contentious ties to the previous reason. 4. Football is a business. It always has been. There's a reason why so many people want to get into it. There's a reason why production quality is so high and the numbers are so inflated. But at the same time, it hasn't felt like that forever. At least not for me. The nostalgia I have for Ronaldo shushing Highbury is hardwired into me. It was just as much of a corporate initiative back then as it is now. And for whoever is shocked after hearing that, I'm sorry for ruining your childhood. And that's part of the reason why MCOs are so disliked, I guess. They are blatantly strategic and therefore corporate, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If the product is good, I will keep paying for it. And so will you, don't lie. The idea of MCOs just kind of messes with the veil of working man's sport. To wrap this one up, there are still several questions that have been raised about this business model and if it embodies the spirit and integrity of the sport. Another thing worth discussing, which is really just speculation at this point and why I left it for the end of the video, is the reasoning behind all of these groups. In the case of Manchester City and CFG, it's widely believed that the purpose is expanding the global footprint of the UAE. As mentioned before, Red Bull's primary purpose is marketing. Mohammed bin Salman has said on numerous occasions that their ventures into sports entertainment is part of the plan to decrease Saudi Arabia's reliance on oil. 777, Eagle Football, Blueco, they all say their ultimate goal is community. Who knows, really? What I do know is that we haven't seen anything yet. And there we have it, a very deep dive into MCOs as they stand today. Let me know what you think. These kind of videos take a very long time to make, so I'd appreciate a thumbs up or a subscribe or something like that. That's all for me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a good day. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.